A family sets out on a summer road trip, captured on CCTV at a rest stop, smiling, buying snacks, everything normal. Hours later, they vanish without a trace. 3 years on, their RV is found in a forest, intact, but the family's gone. What really happened on that July weekend in 2002? On a humid July evening in 2002, traffic cameras along Interstate 64 captured a scene so ordinary that no one gave it a second thought. A white RV eased into a rest area, its headlights reflecting off the gas pumps. Inside, a father focused on the fuel meter. A mother walked hand in hand with her teenage daughter toward the vending machines, and the girl laughed as she pointed a small camera at the neon glow of the shop's sign. To the strangers passing by, it was just another family enjoying the final hours of a summer weekend road trip. But that image, those few minutes of grainy surveillance tape, would soon become the last verified sighting of the Harris family. By nightfall, phone calls went unanswered. By Monday, the father never arrived at work, the daughter never showed up for school, and the mother's library desk sat empty. Neighbors recalled the excitement that morning as the family loaded coolers and sleeping bags, promising a weekend in the Appalachian Mountains. A campground manager remembered their cheerful checkout, the father smiling as he said, "See you next summer." Yet within hours of that farewell, the family vanished as though erased from the map. 3 years later, their RV was found in a forest clearing miles from any drivable road. Inside lay untouched wallets, photographs, and a diary. What was missing were the people themselves. This is the story of how an ordinary weekend journey became one of America's most haunting, unsolved mysteries. In the quiet suburb of Columbus, Ohio, the Harris household looked like any other. Yet behind its neatly trimmed hedges and brick facade lived a family bound by routine, dreams, and a longing for time together. Michael Harris, at 43, worked as an electrical engineer for a mid-sized firm downtown. Colleagues described him as reliable to a fault, a man who never missed a deadline, the kind who stayed late so others could leave early. But to his younger brother, Mark, he confided a different truth: the guilt of missed dinners, the regret of evenings when work eclipsed family. This summer trip, he said, would be different. It was his chance to reset, to give Laura and Olivia more than hurried conversations at the breakfast table. Laura Harris, a 40-year-old librarian at the community branch, was the anchor of the home. Soft-spoken yet meticulous, she documented everything: ticket stubs, photographs, handwritten notes pressed between pages of scrapbooks. Friends remembered how she always carried a disposable camera, snapping pictures of bake sales and Sunday services alike. For her, the road trip was not just a getaway, but a chance to capture moments she believed would one day tell the story of their family's life. Their daughter, 16-year-old Olivia, was restless with the curiosity of her age. At school, she was known as the girl with a camera slung over her shoulder, the one who turned even a cafeteria lunch into a photo shoot. She kept an active online presence, posting snippets of her life to early blogging platforms and chat forums. To her friends, she texted with excitement about hiking trails and mountain views. "I'll send pics when I'm back," she wrote the night before leaving, her words punctuated with smiley faces. On the morning of July 20th, neighbors on Maplewood Drive watched as the family packed coolers of sandwiches, folding chairs, and a stack of guidebooks into the RV Michael had proudly purchased secondhand. One neighbor recalled Olivia's laughter echoing across the cul-de-sac as she posed with the family's golden retriever beside the camper. Another remembered Laura's careful checklist, her arms full of neatly labeled bags. It was, by all accounts, an ordinary family on the brink of an ordinary vacation. No disputes, no shadows, no reason to suspect that within 48 hours, their lives would dissolve into one of the most chilling mysteries in modern America. Saturday morning broke warm and cloudless, the kind of summer day that promised clear roads and open skies. By 10 o'clock, the white RV rolled out of the cul-de-sac, its engine rumbling as neighbors paused from mowing lawns or watering gardens to wave them off. A neighbor across the street, Mrs. Delgado, later told reporters she remembered the image vividly. Michael leaning over the wheel, his expression focused but proud, Laura sitting upright in the passenger seat with a guidebook open on her lap, and Olivia in the back window, flashing a grin as she raised her camera toward the neighborhood like a farewell snapshot. The family's route was carefully mapped. Michael had studied the road atlas in the weeks prior, highlighting scenic stops along the Appalachian foothills. He told his brother that they planned to reach Summersville Lake by late afternoon, a drive of roughly 4 hours with time for lunch along the interstate. At a gas station on the city's edge, security footage showed the RV pulling in briefly before heading east. Witnesses described nothing unusual. Just a family refilling their tank, buying cold drinks, and chatting with the cashier about the summer heat. By early afternoon, the RV merged onto Interstate 64, swallowed by the steady flow of traffic toward West Virginia. Drivers who later came forward recalled nothing remarkable. A white camper with Ohio plates, moving at a steady pace, keeping to the right lane. To them, it was one vehicle among hundreds. Yet for the Harris family, that first day felt like liberation. Olivia updated her blog with a single line typed from her flip phone. "On the road! Mountains soon!" Laura scribbled in her travel journal about the hum of the RV and the sight of endless cornfields giving way to rolling hills. Michael, at the wheel, carried the quiet satisfaction of a plan unfolding exactly as it should. No one on the highway could have guessed that this cheerful departure marked the opening chapter of a mystery that would stretch across decades. By late afternoon, the Harris family reached Summersville Lake Campground, tucked between dense woods and the shimmering waters of the reservoir. The July sun still clung to the horizon, casting orange streaks across the water as families set up tents and children skipped rocks along the shore. Into this picture of small-town summer bliss rolled the white RV from Ohio, blending seamlessly into the scene. The campground manager, a retired park ranger named Carl Benson, remembered the family's arrival clearly. He later told investigators that Michael approached the office with a courteous smile, checking in with practiced efficiency. Laura followed behind, balancing a small cooler in her arms, while Olivia lingered by the entrance, snapping photos of the rustic wooden sign that read, "Welcome to Summersville Lake." Fellow campers noticed them too. A group of college students camping nearby recalled hearing the sound of laughter drifting from their sight as the evening settled. They were grilling something, one of them later said. "You could smell the barbecue sauce. And it smelled like home." Laura, meticulous as ever, unpacked the food she had carefully prepared, potato salad, sandwiches, and a pan of brownies she insisted they share after dinner. Olivia wandered off with her camera, crouching by the lake's edge to catch the reflection of the fading sky. She sent a message to a friend just before dusk. "This place looks like a painting. I'll show you everything when we're back." That night, as lanterns flickered around the campground, Michael built a small fire beside the RV. The family sat together under a canopy of stars, roasting marshmallows and swapping stories. Olivia teased her father for burning his marshmallow. Laura laughed until tears rolled down her cheeks, and other campers heard the sounds of their voices carrying into the quiet woods. To every witness, it was a picture of harmony, a mother devoted to memory, a daughter brimming with wonder, a father relishing rare time away from deadlines. No one noted anything out of place. No arguments, no strangers hovering near their sight, no disturbances. When the embers finally dimmed and silence reclaimed the campground, the Harris family retreated to their RV. The door shut, the lights flicked off, and all appeared peaceful. It was the last evening they would ever spend in the presence of others. Sunday dawned crisp and clear, the lake surface rippling with the first strokes of light. At the Harris campsite, the smell of brewed coffee drifted from the RV's small kitchen window. A few campers who rose early recalled seeing Michael step outside in a faded ball cap, stretching before heading toward the office. At exactly 8 o'clock, he signed the checkout slip with neat handwriting and joked with the manager, Carl Benson. "Beautiful place." "Nee, we'll be back next year," he said. Benson later emphasized how ordinary that exchange had seemed, nothing rushed or unusual. Back at their site, Laura was busy folding blankets and storing dishes into labeled bins. She hummed quietly as she worked, the kind of small domestic routine she carried everywhere, even on vacation. Olivia, Camera slung over her shoulder, moved along the tree line, capturing the golden haze of morning sun filtering through the pines. Oh no. A nearby family remembered seeing her crouched by the trailhead, aiming her lens upward as if trying to trap the light itself. By 9:30, the Harris RV was packed and ready. Laura secured the last bag, Michael double-checked the fuel gauge, and Olivia climbed in, still scrolling through the photos she had just taken. To the campers waving goodbye, it was another family wrapping up a weekend retreat, no different from the others pulling out of the park that morning. The RV rolled out onto the narrow two-lane road, its engine humming steadily as it headed east. Their plan, later pieced together from Michael's notes and Laura's itinerary, was to visit a scenic overlook before beginning the drive back to Ohio by evening. There was nothing ominous in their departure. No storm clouds, no raised voices, no forgotten items left behind. The Harris family left Summersville Lake the way they had arrived. Calm, content, and unsuspecting of the shadow that waited beyond the forested hills. The last confirmed glimpse of the Harris family came not from a neighbor's memory or a camper's recollection, but from a silent machine, a security camera bolted to the roof of a rest area off Interstate 64. The footage, later released to investigators, showed a sequence of moments so ordinary that its very normalcy became haunting. At 11:42 a.m., the white RV pulled into the lot, parking beside a row of pickup trucks. The camera, its lens smudged by summer dust, captured Michael stepping down from the driver's seat. He straightened his ball cap, swiped sweat from his forehead, and walked toward the gas pump. His movements were calm, methodical. The routine of any traveler. A few seconds later, Laura emerged, carrying a tote bag. She walked with Olivia toward the small brick convenience store. The footage caught them mid-conversation, Laura gesturing with her hands, Olivia laughing, tilting her head back in a way her friends would later say was unmistakably hers. The teenager briefly lifted her camera and appeared to snap a picture of the soda machine outside the store, though no photograph of it was ever recovered. Inside the shop, a cashier remembered them buying bottled water, chips, and a candy bar. The receipt, time-stamped 11:49 a.m., would become the last paper trail of their existence. The cashier later described them as just a happy family, polite, nothing weird at all. Meanwhile, Michael finished fueling the RV, returning the nozzle with practiced precision. He glanced toward the store windows, as though checking on his wife and daughter, before climbing back behind the wheel. Moments later, Laura and Olivia exited, holding a plastic bag of snacks. Okay. Olivia's smile was wide as she leaned briefly against the RV's side, tapping her phone to send what would be her final message. I'll tell you all about it when I'm home tomorrow. At 12:10 p.m., the RV eased back onto the interstate. The camera caught it for just a few seconds as it merged with traffic, the white rectangle growing smaller until it vanished beyond the frame. That clip, later replayed countless times on news broadcasts, became a chilling bookmark, the last verifiable record of the Harrises alive and together. Investigators studied the footage frame by frame, searching for anomalies. Was anyone following them? Did another vehicle linger nearby? The surrounding cars seemed unremarkable. Sedans, SUVs, truckers on lunch breaks. No one appeared to take notice of the family. Yet the ordinariness itself was unsettling. Everything looked fine. No signs of distress, no strangers hovering, no reason to believe that within hours they would simply cease to exist on the public record. The tape ended like thousands of others archived from that summer. Except this one marked the point where a family of three slipped off the map. For friends, neighbors, and later the nation, the CCTV footage became more than evidence. It was a ghostly reminder that sometimes the most terrifying mysteries begin with a moment that looks perfectly safe. After the Harris family's RV pulled out of the rest area at 12:10 p.m., the timeline fractured. The interstate that Sunday was steady with weekend travelers, yet no toll camera, traffic sensor, or roadside business recorded the vehicle again. It was as though the RV had slipped into a corridor of silence. By early evening, unease began to ripple among relatives. Michael had promised his younger brother, Mark, a call once they were safely back in Ohio. That call never came. At first, Mark assumed a weak signal in the mountains or simple fatigue from the drive. But as the hours passed, worry hardened. At 8 p.m., Laura's sister tried calling her cell phone. The line rang twice before cutting to voicemail. Olivia's friends flooded her with texts that went unanswered. Unusual for a teenager who rarely put her phone down. By 10 p.m., the tone among relatives shifted from anxious to alarmed. Just after midnight, Mark drove to the Harris home in Columbus. The driveway was empty, the porch light still on, and the weekend newspapers untouched. Inside, nothing appeared out of place. The house was frozen in the moment they had left it. Dishes washed, beds made, calendars marked with the word trip. Monday morning brought confirmation of the nightmare. Michael failed to appear at the engineering firm where he had worked for over a decade. Colleagues who considered him unfailingly punctual grew concerned immediately. Across town, Laura's supervisor noted her absence from the library, while Olivia's high school homeroom marked her missing for the first time all semester. Calls to the family's cell phones went unanswered throughout the day. By mid-morning, relatives contacted police. Initial responses were cautious. Adults sometimes changed travel plans, officers said, and dead cell batteries weren't unusual in remote terrain. Yet the fact that Olivia was a minor, paired with the family's spotless record of responsibility, pushed the case past routine. By 2 p.m., Monday, an official missing persons report was filed. The Harris family, who had left home just 36 hours earlier for a weekend of rest and photographs, was now officially considered vanished. And investigators faced their first, perplexing reality. 3 people and an entire RV had disappeared on a sunny Sunday afternoon in full view of America's highways. By Tuesday morning, the Harris disappearance had escalated far beyond a family concern. With a minor involved, the FBI joined state police and local sheriff's departments, transforming what had been a quiet file into a high-priority operation. The question was simple but terrifying. How could an RV the size of a delivery truck vanish in daylight without leaving a single trail? Command posts were established near Summersville, West Virginia, where the family had last been confirmed. Maps spread across folding tables, push pins marking highways, side roads, and forest trails. Dozens of officers fanned out, their radios crackling with updates. Helicopters scoured the Appalachian ridges, their rotors echoing across valleys. Search dogs were brought in, noses pressed to clothing retrieved from the Harris home. The animals led handlers along trailheads and riverbanks, but never settled on a consistent path. Rangers on horseback searched remote clearings. Volunteer fire departments and church groups joined, combing through fields and creeks, sometimes hand in hand. Leads trickled in, each one demanding manpower. A farmer swore he saw headlights flickering in the hills late Sunday night. A motel clerk thought she'd checked in a woman resembling Laura. A trucker claimed to have passed a similar RV, but couldn't recall the plate. Each story sent teams racing across counties, only to return empty-handed. Meanwhile, the national press descended. By Thursday, satellite vans lined the roads outside the sheriff's office. Headlines blared, "Family vanishes on American road trip." Morning talk shows debated possibilities, a highway predator, a tragic accident, even whispers of abduction by an organized group. For neighbors back in Ohio, the sight of reporters knocking on doors felt surreal. Despite the noise, the investigation pressed forward. Crews dragged sections of the Gauley River in case the RV had plunged from a bridge. Drones, new technology at the time, were tested to scan forest canopies. Retired miners guided officers through abandoned shafts that dotted the hills. Yet day after day, nothing surfaced, no skid marks, no debris, no wallet dropped in the brush. The scale of the operation was staggering. Over the first 2 weeks, more than 300 personnel logged thousands of search hours. The National Guard contributed thermal imaging flights at night, sweeping for heat signatures in valleys where even flashlights could not penetrate. They found deer, stray dogs, and campers. But no trace of 3 human beings who had supposedly driven that way. For the Harris relatives, the effort was both comforting and agonizing. Mark Harris stood before cameras, pleading, "If anyone saw something, anything at all, please come forward." His voice cracked under the weight of uncertainty. Behind him, photographs of Michael, Laura, and Olivia were pinned to poster boards, their smiling faces staring out at crowds of strangers. By the end of the second week, investigators were left with a paradox. The more territory they searched, the more impossible it seemed that the RV had ever been there. It was as though the family had driven out of the rest area and simply dissolved into the folds of the Appalachian Hills. Autumn 2005, 3 years had passed since the Harris family vanished. For most Americans, the case had faded into the background, replaced by new headlines and fresh tragedies. For the family's relatives, however, the absence never quieted. Birthdays passed, holidays arrived with empty chairs, and every unknown caller ID brought a flicker of hope. Then, on a crisp October afternoon, a deer hunter named Frank Whitaker hiked deep into the Monongahela National Forest. Following the tracks of game, he strayed far from marked trails. Cresting a ridge, he froze. Through the trees, partially obscured by tangled undergrowth, sat a large white vehicle. At first, Whitaker thought it was a derelict trailer abandoned years earlier. But as he approached, the outline sharpened. An RV, paint dulled by dust but strangely intact. His stomach tightened as he read the plate number. He had seen it countless times on flyers taped to gas stations and post offices. The Harris family's missing vehicle. Authorities swarmed the site within hours. Television crews weren't far behind. For investigators, it was a jolt of both relief and dread. At last, a tangible lead. Yet the questions multiplied the moment they examined the scene. The RV sat in a natural clearing, surrounded by thick trees. No drivable road reached the spot. The closest service trail ended nearly half a mile away, its path too narrow for a vehicle of that size. How the camper had arrived there was an enigma in itself. Externally, the RV showed no major damage. Tires were flat from neglect, but windows remained unbroken, and the body bore no crash marks. It looked less like a wreck and more like someone had simply parked it and walked away. Inside, the discoveries unsettled even seasoned officers. On the driver's seat rested Michael's wallet. Credit cards, cash, and ID still inside. In the passenger seat lay Laura's handbag, containing makeup, medicine, and family photos. In the back sat Olivia's backpack, holding notebooks, pens, and a stack of prints from her camera. Most disturbing was the refrigerator. Though its power had long since failed, the shelves held remnants of the meals Laura had prepared before the trip, containers of salad, foil-wrapped sandwiches, even unopened sodas. All spoiled, but untouched. On the counter, bags of chips and candy from the rest area purchase sat as though waiting for someone to return. Then came the camera. Investigators found it tucked into Olivia's bag. After careful recovery, technicians developed the final roll of film. Among landscapes and campfire snapshots appeared one last image, time-stamped shortly after noon on July 21st, 2002. The day they vanished, it showed a mountain overlook bathed in sunlight, with no people visible. Experts later concluded it must have been taken within an hour after leaving the rest area. Beyond that, nothing. No blood, no signs of a struggle, no evidence of forced entry or foul play. The Harris family's belongings remained as if they had simply stepped out for a walk and never returned. For relatives, the news was devastating. Finding the RV should have been the answer, Mark Harris later told a reporter, but it only raised more questions. The rediscovery reignited national interest. News anchors asked how an entire vehicle could sit undetected for 3 years in a forest frequently visited by hunters and hikers. Commentators debated whether someone had deliberately hidden it or whether it had been overlooked by chance. For investigators, the RV was both breakthrough and dead end. It offered a scene frozen in time, but it gave no clue as to where the Harris family had gone. The recovery of the RV launched a second wave of investigation, this time more forensic than frantic. Analysts in crisp gloves dusted every surface, lifted fibers from the seats, and swabbed for traces of blood or bodily fluids. The results came back barren. There were no fingerprints beyond those of the family themselves, no evidence of a break-in, no violent struggle. For detectives, the absence of evidence was almost worse than the presence of it. Three major theories quickly emerged. The first was accident. Perhaps the family had parked in the forest, set off for a short hike, and fallen victim to the treacherous terrain. Appalachia is riddled with ravines, caves, and sudden drop-offs that could swallow a person without leaving a trace. Yet extensive searches within a 10-mile radius turned up no bones, no clothing, not even a shoe. After 3 years of decomposition and animal activity, some remains might have been lost. But nothing at all? Investigators struggled to accept it. The second theory was crime. Could the family have been intercepted? Forced out of the RV? Marched into the woods? This scenario explained their personal items being left behind, but it raised harder questions. Why would a perpetrator leave wallets full of cash, a purse of valuables, and a working vehicle untouched? Without robbery, what was the motive? And how had they managed to relocate the RV into a place even seasoned rangers called impossible to reach by vehicle? Some investigators whispered about organized crime, others about a predator who knew the terrain intimately. But there was never a single suspect, no usable lead. The third theory was voluntary disappearance, a deliberate vanishing act. Families had done it before. Walking away from debt, from conflict, from hidden lives. Yet the Harrises didn't fit the pattern. Financial records showed no strain. Credit cards were unused after the rest area stop, and there were no indications of secret identities. Friends described them as tightly knit, especially Michael, who had told co-workers he wanted this trip to mark a new chapter of family closeness. To vanish by choice would have required planning and outside help, neither of which investigators uncovered. Experts brought in by the FBI added psychological profiles. Theories circulated about cult activity in the mountains, about abduction rings operating along the interstate, even about rogue survivalists luring travelers. None were supported by physical proof. The most baffling detail remained the RV's location. A vehicle of that size should have left ruts, broken branches, or at least signs of towing. Yet forensic botanists concluded that the undergrowth surrounding the site had been undisturbed for years, suggesting the RV had been there since 2002. How it had arrived without a road was a question no expert could satisfactorily answer. In press conferences, investigators admitted frustration. "We have an intact vehicle, untouched belongings, and no human presence," one FBI agent said. "It is a paradox. The more evidence we recover, the less sense it makes." For the Harris relatives, each theory felt like a door that opened only to reveal another wall: accident, crime, voluntary disappearance. All possible, all flawed. What remained was an ache, the knowledge that their loved ones had entered that forest, and no theory could bring them back. Nearly a decade after the Harrises vanished, just as the case seemed destined for dusty archives, a man walked into a Charleston police station with a story that reignited national attention. He identified himself as Daniel Cross, a drifter in his mid-40s. Nervous but insistent, he claimed that on the night of July 21st, 2002, he had been camping illegally in the forest when he saw the family's RV parked along a dirt track. According to his statement, he watched the Harrises step out under the cover of darkness. He swore Olivia was crying, her mother holding her close, while Michael led them down a trail into the trees. Moments later, Cross claimed, he heard a scream echo through the hills. The account electrified the media. Newspapers plastered headlines. Eyewitness breaks silence after 10 years. Talk shows debated whether this could be the missing piece investigators had waited for. Relatives, worn down by years of silence, felt a dangerous flicker of hope. But under scrutiny, the story unraveled. Investigators pressed Cross for details. What clothing had they worn? What direction had they walked? What unique features marked the RV? His answers shifted with each interview. When shown photographs of the actual campsite and vehicle, he stumbled, unable to identify details not already public. Background checks revealed a troubling pattern. Cross had a history of fabricating stories for attention, including false tips in other unsolved cases. Polygraph tests produced inconclusive results, and forensic teams found no evidence linking him to the area that night. Within weeks, authorities dismissed his claims as unreliable, even deliberately deceptive. For the Harris relatives, the letdown was brutal. "Every time we think there's hope," Mark Harris said quietly to reporters, "someone comes along and tears it away." The false lead left scars deeper than silence itself. It reminded the family that in the void of truth, there would always be those willing to exploit mystery for their own ends. And it pushed the case, once again, back into the shadows of uncertainty. 23 years have passed since the Harris family disappeared, and the mystery remains suspended between memory and myth. The case file, once a constant presence on newsroom desks and primetime broadcasts, now sits buried in a police archive, its edges frayed, its pages coated with dust. In Columbus, the Harris home has long since been sold. New families have come and gone. Children ride bicycles across the same cul-de-sac where Olivia once posed with her camera. Few of them know the story of the family that vanished on a weekend road trip. For neighbors who were there, the memory lingers like a shadow no renovation can erase. Mark Harris, now in his late 50s, carries the weight of decades of unanswered questions. He no longer stands before cameras, no longer pleads in public forums. Yet in private, he admits he still scans the faces of women who could be Olivia's age, wondering if his niece survived somehow, if she built a new life under another name. The thought sustains him as much as it tortures him. Investigators who once filled binders with theories have since retired or moved on to other posts. Some admit the case still troubles them. How an RV could rest undisturbed in a forest clearing, belongings intact, while the people it carried simply evaporated. "It's the one puzzle I never fit together," one former FBI agent confessed in a recent interview. Among true crime communities online, the Harris mystery has become a modern folktale. Reddit threads dissect the camera's final photograph. Podcasters debate whether cult activity or an undiscovered cave system could explain the disappearance. Documentaries revisit the story, often with more speculation than fact, feeding a public appetite for answers that reality refuses to supply. For those closest to the case, though, the speculation means little. They measure the passing years not in theories but in absences. Graduations never attended, holidays without laughter, photographs that will never be taken. Laura would be 63 now, Michael 66, and Olivia 39. Their faces, frozen in the last images before they vanished, never aged past the summer of 2002. What endures is not clarity but a lesson. That even in a country laced with highways, cameras, and watchful eyes, people can vanish without explanation. That ordinary lives. An engineer, a librarian, a teenage girl with dreams of photography, can slide from the realm of the familiar into the abyss of the unknown. And perhaps that is why the Harris disappearance continues to haunt. It is not only a mystery about where they went, but a reminder of how fragile certainty truly is. On any given day, in any given place, the line between safety and silence can be thinner than we imagine. The story of the Harrises is more than a case file. It is a call to remember that every vanished life leaves behind a family waiting, hoping, and remembering. And until the truth is uncovered, the silence around them is an unfinished chapter in America's collective memory. If this story moved you, don't let it fade into silence. Click like to help more people remember the Harrises, and subscribe to our channel, Silent Traces, for more haunting true stories that deserve to be told. And if you have thoughts or theories about what might have happened, share them in the comments. We'd love to hear your voice.